Preseason magazine season. It's one of our favorite times of year, and we are here breaking down yet another fantastic publication to help get us all ready for kickoff. The 2024 College Football Focus Season Preview Magazine, the first ever edition, which is out online, helping me break it all down, my good friend Blayne Gilmer, who was a key cog in the operation, making sure this thing got up to speed, and what a fantastic product it is. Blayne, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time.
Oh man, I'm excited to be back on with you. I'm excited to be back on with SEC Unfiltered. Excited all the stuff we did to get this thing kicked off, and now you guys are growing like crazy. And we got the CFB Focus 2024 season preview to talk about here.
Yeah, man, it's really cool, obviously, to get back on the airwaves with you. Obviously, we did a lot of great work in the spring, and things happen. We go our separate ways. But you continue to be a source of inspiration, especially what you did, the work you continue to do, I feel like, behind the scenes, this magazine, other things as well. So let's first, Blayne, talk about the work that went in, because I want to make sure we give credit to the proper parties that, again, did the writing, did the graphics, which I know you did a lot of, the whole brains behind it. There's a lot that goes into putting together a preseason magazine, right? It's not just, hey, let's write up a couple previews, throw it together. This is a long process, especially with things like the transfer portal, coaching changes. I mean, the ever-changing conference realignment, ever-changing landscape of college football. So take a moment, if you will, to shed some light on the work that went in this thing and maybe some people who made some big contributions along the way.
Yeah, so I've had this little side project for a while, the CFBpod.com, which was really just to talk about kind of all of college football. You kind of what you guys do at SEC Unfiltered, but we kind of just broadened it out a little bit more. And we said, hey, it's a really highly trafficked space out there when it comes to the content creation and the podcast and stuff like that. But like, we can really make some waves with a preview magazine that is very fan friendly and has a different look than all the other preview magazines. So we started talking about it kind of at the end of 2023 as the season was ending. And when I say we, myself, Mike Wattsman, who's decades Big Ten beat writer, Ohio State especially, Dave Shoemate, who of course works with you at SEC Unfiltered, and then Brendan Moore, who is a beat writer for Michigan State, and then you have Donovan White, who was an offensive lineman at Miami of Ohio, also covers a lot of that Big Ten area and is a high school football coach himself. So we kind of ran the gamut of experience and different things, and really in about February, March, we started buckling down and started laying down the structure of it and saying, okay, here's how we want to go about it. And what we ended up coming up with was we did a team preview on every single Power 4 team, plus Notre Dame, Oregon State, and Washington State. And then we did a conference preview on all the G5 conferences that was pretty in-depth as well. So to your point, I mean, once we got through the transfer portal, the end of April, I believe it was, start of May, then you start having an idea of who's where. Well, then there's another transfer portal window and things like that. So figuring out where everybody was, getting all the schedules down, getting the one thing that we have is a little bit different than most. We have a two deep that tells you, okay, who's a transfer, who's a returning starter, all that kind of stuff. So it was just trying to go through and meticulously work through all that. So it was quite the undertaking.
Blayne, was there anything that surprised you about that process that was more difficult? Or because, I mean, again, I'm sure, before you published your first, you were a consumer. Was there anything that maybe you thought about the whole magazine making process that you were like, wow, like that kind of just stuck out to you from the overall process?
Yeah, just from a putting it together standpoint, it was, man, I know what I want it to look like. But then when you get the information, you're like, oh, well, that's a little bit too long. It's going to bleed over into this. And then trying to make it look good and trying to make it as concise as possible for people to be able to understand and people to think is aesthetically pleasing as well.
Mm-hmm. So, Blayne, let's move into the 2024 season. The AP poll will drop in around 2 weeks or so, and the big debate's going to be between Georgia and Ohio State. Who should be number one? I think it's probably going to be the Dogs. I'm sure you think that as well, but there will be lots of debate. Do you agree with me it'll be Georgia? And if so, why do you think Georgia is deserving of that ranking ahead of Ohio State when you compare those two teams?
Yeah, Ohio State and Georgia were the two. They ended up being 1-2, Georgia being number one in our preview, Ohio State number two. And the reason that it worked out that way, Chris, is because I look at where Georgia has won when they've been really, really good, and it's been in the trenches. And we have in our position grouping rankings, we have Georgia's offensive line is the best offensive line in the country. They have four guys when you go from left tackle, left guard, and right tackle that have all started because Dylan Fairchild started about 6 games or so last year, got that experience under his belt. They're replacing Von Prawn at center, but they have Jared Wilson, who's been there for 3 years and had a lot of experience when they were blowing teams out and stuff like that. So we really thought that, hey, when you look at the offensive lines, Ohio State has a lot of questions on their offensive line. They're replacing center, they're replacing right tackle. Seth McLaughlin, who's infamous for his snaps at Alabama now, could end up playing center for them and things of that nature. They could have a young guy in Luke Montgomery who's very talented, maybe coming in and playing at the right guard position. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out for Ohio State up front. The other flip side of that is Ohio State's going to be really, really good at the skill positions. But when you go and look at it too, quarterback play, right? We don't know what Will Howard is going to be under Chip Kelly and under Ryan Day. We know what he did at Kansas. He's a tough kid. He's able to be a little bit of a dual threat, but he's not the most polished passer in the world. But man, Carson Beck is a legitimate guy that could be a number one pick in the NFL draft in 2025, the way that scouts and people are talking about him at the Manning Passing Academy and things of that. So, it's just at the end of the day, we went with Georgia. Now, if I had to project out towards the end of the year who will probably be number one longer, it may be Ohio State by the end of the year because Georgia's schedule is absolutely brutal. Could be some landmines in there. But at the beginning of the year, if I had to say one, I'd go with the Dogs.
Blayne, when you talk 12-team college football playoff, how many teams do you think realistically in the SEC are in college football playoff contention? And I ask that because looking at you guys' projected standings, and again, you can find all of this in the magazine, so make sure you go get yours today. Texas, Georgia, and Ole Miss all winning 11 games, Bama at 10 wins. Then comes the 9-win plateau of A&M, Missouri, Tennessee, and it seems like those teams probably going to be right there on the fringe. But, I mean, I'm sure you would also call those at least contenders. I mean, does the SEC, is it fair to say they go 7 or 8 deep in regards to teams that come into this season with aspirations, realistic aspirations of making a playoff?
Oh, yes. In terms of the teams that have the realistic capability to do so, if things fall right for them, it could be that many. But I think just realistically, what you're going to see is probably 4 get in, probably a third of the field being SEC teams and a couple of them, maybe, well, it can't be a couple because of the conference championship, but one of them is going to get that bye, and then they're going to try to spread out the other teams so they don't have rematches early on and things like that. To me, Chris, is going to be the most fascinating thing because you're going to see so many rematches, and we end up having rematches in our predictions because I mean, you've got teams that are just powerhouse teams in both the Big Ten and the SEC that are going to play each other in the regular season, and they're probably going to end up playing again in the college football playoff. So that's going to be very interesting to see, and something I think the committee will have to work through and learn with this first year of the 12-team playoff as well.
Blayne, looking at that next tier that you guys have in your projected SEC standings in the 8-win range, LSU, Kentucky, and Auburn, you guys all have at 8-4. I'll include Oklahoma in this as well, 7-5. And the reason I bring this up, sleepers for the college football playoff. Of this next group of teams, who do you think out of that group would be most primed to make a run at the college football playoff with their schedule and talent returning this year?
Well, it's funny. I'm actually going to go a little bit different than what you said on all those because one team we kind of glossed over a little bit. We mentioned them there just a little bit, but I was going through and I was reading the SEC preview that my man Dave Shoemate put together, and then I put all the statistics and everything in on the side panels, and I'm looking and I'm going, Am I talking myself into believing into Texas A&M again? Am I talking myself into believing in the Aggies again? Because you see the talent, Chris. They're one of 6 teams, I think, in the entire country that has had at least one 5-star in each of their last 5 recruiting classes. And despite the chaos of the Jimbo Fisher era, despite everything that's happened, there's still plenty of talent there. The cupboard is not bare, and you have a totally new just breath of fresh air in there with Mike Elko, and somebody that is the antithesis of what Jimbo Fisher is, and is going to absolutely, I think, get the best. He's a guy, if you saw even just one game, just a microcosm of what he did at Duke, that game opening up against Clemson last year, a guy who just gets every last drop out of his players. I think that is what you're going to see now with tremendous talent there for Texas A&M, and they can really set a tone nationally when they welcome Notre Dame in to Kyle Field, to open up the season. I think that's going to be a tremendous atmosphere, and it's going to be something that I think gets a lot of people's attention. As well as I do from our time working together, I think Connor Wigman can be a stud. I really do. He's got all the talent, and people don't realize, look at that wide receiver core. It's just the fact that Jimbo Fisher never really utilized them in a way that they could be utilized. But guys like Moose Muhammad and Noah Thomas, Ja'Day Walker, I mean, they got plenty of guys that can go get the football. So I'm excited about them on offense. I think they've got talent on defense with, Taryn York, Shamar Turner. Nick Scorton is going to be a nightmare. So I wouldn't be shocked if Texas A&M ends up surprising everybody and winning like 10 games or more.
Blayne, I feel like I'm being asked to put my hand back on the burner after being already burnt last year. I don't know if I can do it quite yet. I'm not going to be mad if I'm surprised, but I don't know if I can do it quite yet. We'll see, though. They are a heck of a storyline going in this year. I mentioned again, Blayne, things that surprised you about putting together a magazine. You mentioned the stats and putting all that together. Was there anything in regards to numbers? Or you just talking with the guys and talking with the team, talking about these teams? Was there anything maybe statistically, returning experience, like schedules, whatever it may be, anything that surprised you in regards to these SEC teams? Was there any numbers or anything like that jumped out to you? I know you just kind of mentioned Texas A&M. It sounds like you were kind of maybe surprised to be buying back into the hype, but was there anything in particular where you're like, I didn't expect to feel that way? For example, for me, I didn't expect to be as high on Kentucky as I was. And when you look at their schedule, I was like, man, I didn't think I'd have Kentucky at 8-4, but here we are. So anything like that or anything else jump out to you?
I was surprised to see just how little return in production that South Carolina has offensively, because you didn't realize, you go back and look, you don't realize how much Spencer Rattler meant to that football team last year. I mean, if I could go back posthumously and give a fake like Heisman vote or something, just because of how much he meant to that team, that kind of stuff, he meant a ton to them. And now there's a tremendous amount of pressure on guys to step up. You talk about Juice Wells being gone and all of those things. They do get Rocket Sanders in there, but just a very low amount of offensive production returning for them. You mentioned Kentucky. I kind of got in the same mode. Everybody knows that's watched me throughout coverage knows that I love me some Kentucky Wildcats. I just think Mark Stoops him and Mike Elko are kind of like, you've got like the same guy that are coaching those two teams. And I really just like how he puts together a football program. It's really going to depend on Brock Vandagriff and how does he respond with the lights on. You got to think about it. He hasn't been the guy since he was in a state, playoff game in single A football in Georgia. Okay. So, that's a little bit different than lining up under the bright lights at Kroger Field and having all these expectations on you. So they have plenty of talent on the outside, did a great job. That wide receiving core has been there, talk about, Dane Key and then add some of the transfers that they've got in there. They've had the talent. Their thing has been, okay, sometimes they run the football well, and sometimes they've been able to sling it. Can they put both together and play complementary football? That'll be interesting to see with Kentucky this year. But yeah, I think that the just amount that South Carolina is going to have to build back offensively. And that's funny to say because they were missing offensive linemen all year long last year and things like that. But what they're going to have to do, and then on the converse side of that, they have a lot of people, a lot of production, almost 80% of production returning on the defensive side. So it's going to be a nice dichotomy there of that in Columbia.
Blayne, you mentioned South Carolina, so let's talk about the bottom of the SEC. Some of these teams down at the bottom of the standings: Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, Florida, South Carolina, Arkansas, some of the typical names of that group. Which of those, if any, do you think could potentially surprise? And I'm not saying surprise like get to a college football playoff. I'm saying maybe get to 7 or 8 wins. And I know you guys have Arkansas at 6-6, 3-5 in the conference, which I've also got Arkansas at 6-6. And I think a lot would consider that a surprise. But for you specifically, I mean, is there anybody that jumps out to you that you think, I think they could be a little bit better than folks are giving them credit for?
Oh, I think it is Arkansas because I think you look at lightning in a bottle that Bobby Petrino has been able to produce at the quarterback position in time. And then you look at, let's forget about, the low completion percentage for Taylor Green at Boise State for a little while. And let's just think ceiling. Okay. What is the ceiling for Taylor Green? And what is it when you have Bobby Petrino, the just mad scientist over there putting things together? They have a receiving core that was horribly underutilized in my opinion last year, and now has so many guys that have had SEC experience that are playing, at a high level when they were utilized. And now you bring in Jaquindon Jackson, who I think is a sledgehammer that nobody is talking about from Utah. That is just, I mean, he runs like he's mad at the world. I don't know what happened to that young man, but there's some anger in there that he's going to have to work out in therapy. And I think he does it, I think he does it on Saturdays when he's playing against defenses. So you look at the schedule for Arkansas. I mean, that game on the road with Oklahoma State is going to be a real, okay, where are we at litmus test, but it doesn't kill you either way. It's a good test early on, and you should sandwich it with a couple of good wins there with the Arkansas Pine Bluff and UAB at home. And then, a key stretch right there where you play Auburn, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and LSU. And if you can come out, manage to be, 2-2, in that, it could end up being a pretty decent season for Arkansas when you look at things.
Blayne, going to SEC Media Days, talking to folks this offseason from both Texas and Oklahoma, the thing they get so tired of hearing about is the SEC grind, right? Like the grind of an SEC season. You're very familiar with SEC football, Blayne. You've watched it for a really long time. You've covered it. How would you explain the SEC grind to Texas and Oklahoma folks? And do you think that Texas and OU, and these are two programs in much different positions, but do you think they're going to feel that this year when it comes to the SEC grind week in, week out?
Yeah, so Texas and Oklahoma fans, you know what it's like when you play each other? Okay, now do that about 5 or 6 more times in a year. Okay, that's what it is, because God bless the Big 12, but there's just not the same amount of Jimmys and Joes that you see every given Saturday. I mean, even a team like a South Carolina last year at Georgia had Georgia on the ropes. And it's because when you look at it, you're like, oh, that guy for South Carolina is going to play in the NFL, and that guy is too, and things like. And you can't say that with some of the Big 12 teams, because you go look year in and year out, what conference absolutely gets just vacuumed into the NFL, and it's the SEC by far and away, more than the Big Ten, more than anybody else. So that's what you're going to see. Now, I think they're fortunate that they have the resources in this period of NIL, and they are great programs. So they already bring in a high level of talent. I think the biggest adjustment for Texas and for Oklahoma this year is going to be in the trenches. I think you talk about Texas defensive line wise, replacing so much off that defensive front from a year ago. And then Oklahoma, we know the big question that you got to circle. I mean, they've got explosive talent out the, wazoo over there when it comes to like Deion Burks at the wide receiver position, a couple other guys that they got returning. We know what Jackson Arnold could be, but that offensive line, who knows what that offensive line is going to be, because it is it was a very questionable deal last year. And now they don't have a whole lot of experience returning. So it's going to be that's the big question. A lot of transfers, a lot of shuffling around in that offensive line for Oklahoma.
Blayne, finally, let's look at you guys' college football playoff projections. 4 SEC teams in the field with Georgia, Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss. Really interesting semifinals. Like you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of rematches. Georgia, Texas, and Oregon, Ohio State, which I didn't look at you guys' Big Ten championship game predictions. I would imagine, though, that's the Big Ten title game. So we get a rematch of the SEC title, the Big Ten title. We get Georgia, Ohio State 1 versus 2, and the predicted national champion is the Georgia Bulldogs.
I think Georgia is the most talented team. And, there's all kinds of stuff. If they can stay out of their own way, they're well documented with some of the legal troubles that are going on in Athens and all that kind of stuff. If they can stay out of their own way, and you have to stay healthy. But the thing about it is, Chris, now I think there's less room for surprises in the playoff now, because you look at the NFL, right? When you look at the NFL, it's a long season and it's a long playoff that has always been. And what typically happens at the end of it, that most talented team that has been there, the healthiest and most talented, the combination of that is going to be there. Of course, none of us, you look at what happened with Jordan Travis at FSU last year is could be a totally different story for Florida State if he hadn't got hurt. But, so Lord willing, everybody stays healthy. I'd love to see a year where all the big teams have their quarterbacks stay healthy and things like that, and see how it plays out. But I just think a team that we didn't really talk about much, Ole Miss, I think is going to be a team that can make noise. They've just got talent. Just Lane has been able to utilize this NIL era, and I think they're going to make some noise in the playoff, at least win a game. And you talk about Alabama. People freak out with Kalen DeBoer, going from Nick Saban to Kalen DeBoer, and who knows what ends up being the ultimate playing field there. But it's still Alabama, and until you beat them, it's going to be interesting to see. But we've got Oregon and Alabama facing in the first round of the playoffs, so that would be an interesting contest for sure.
Blayne, who would you buy more stock in right now, Ole Miss or Alabama?
I would buy more stock in Ole Miss, because listen, Lane Kiffin, for all of the flash and the TikTok videos and everything like that, he is now the elder statesman in the SEC compared to a lot of these coaches. And anybody that has the just set on him like he does to go on Paul Feinbaum and own that man in front of national television, he has my vote. Like if Lane was running for office, I'd say you're my guy,
Blayne Gilmer, Blayne, let me say this, man. You guys did a fantastic job. One of the best out there when it comes to the preseason magazine game. Again, the College Football Focus Season Preview Magazine. Blayne, let folks know where they can check it out. I was going to say let folks know where they can get their hands on one, but obviously I know it's an online edition. And also, too, I want to say thank you to you guys and your team. SEC Unfiltered, proudly featured at the bottom of every single SEC page. QR codes can take you to different videos, different content. It's really, really cool the way it's set up, man. So, again, thank you to you and you guys. And let folks know who are tuned in where they can go check out the magazine.
Yeah, it's cfbpod.com, and it's just really, it's a simple website. We made the website pretty much just to sell the magazine. So you put it on there, and you're going to see it right off the bat, and it's a digital 344 page download that right when you buy it, you put your credit card in there, and you buy it, and you can download it immediately, have it on save it, on your phone, on your desktop, wherever you need. And big thank you once again to Mike Wattsman, who he wrote the Big Ten Conference. You got Brennan Moore, who did all of the ACC, Donovan White, who did the Big 12, and then of course Dave Shoemate of SEC Unfiltered that did all of the SEC work. Except me, I did the Georgia page. I did the one for the Dogs, and then you talk about all the G5 work and things like that. It was tremendous effort, and we would love for you guys to support it. Heck, we may even, and I even told this, we may even throw a special promo code out there that I'll get Chris hooked up with for if anybody wants to put in SEC Unfiltered, we'll give you a little discount off of it. But right now it's not much. It's only $12 for all that information. So we'd love to have you go to cfbpod.com and get your copy today. That'd be much appreciated.
Blayne, again, congratulations to you guys. A phenomenal job as always. And man, this was a lot of fun. Reminded me of the good old days, man. So keep up the good work, and maybe we'll do it again soon down the road.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris.